Hello, and welcome to Catholicism in the Car. My name is Parker Zerbal. Yesterday I talked a little bit more about the differences between Monergism and Synergism, and how I really think, unless if they're taken in their extremes, I think they're really the same thing. Now I know that will probably make a lot of people unhappy, maybe even Catholics. It will make Catholics unhappy that I say that. But I don't see from a philosophical point of view, and many of these arguments need to be first and foremost analyzed from a philosophical point of view, because they are first and foremost philosophical arguments with theological subjects. Okay? It seems that unless you're a monergist who's in the extreme, who says that man has absolutely no free will, only God's action exists, and I've talked about some of the consequences of that view, mainly that it really does make God a tyrant, and it makes relationship with God impossible. Or if you take the other extreme, the extreme synergistic view, where man can completely act on his own in his relationship with God. This just doesn't make sense from a standpoint of believing that God is creator and that God creates ex nihilo from nothing. Because at the very base, if God creates ex nihilo, everything God creates is held in existence by him at all times. So there is at least that action from God. And thus every other action, whether it be the action done by human will or whatever else, does come from God in the end. Not directly necessarily, because God certainly could give us the ability of free will and let us actually use it, let it actually be free will. I don't think God is a liar. I don't think he would give us a will that is not a will, where it's just basically a figment of our imagination, and and doesn't actually do anything, doesn't actually work. Okay? Now I want to talk a little bit now about why people have gotten so frustrated over this question, particularly in the last 500 or so years since the Protestant Reformation. Now, this is going to test my limits, the limits of my knowledge of Protestantism. And really, to be fair, it is very difficult to know a comprehensive history of Protestantism. It is very, very difficult, because there is no monolithic view on virtually any point. The only one that I can think of that at least classically defines Protestants is the view of Sola Fide. But I would say even among classic Protestants, what Sola Fide actually means is something very different. Some Protestants, mainly from the Calvinist point of view, would categorize anyone who says that man has free will, or that man acts in cooperation with God, even if it is God who gives him those powers, that if man has that ability, that that the person that says this is somehow worth basing his religion upon a works righteousness point of view. Which, again, to me, is not a very good argument if you think that every work that is done by man is allowed for by God, and every power that man has to do every work is given to him by God. So I don't necessarily see why this is much of an issue. But these debates have raged for quite a long time. Within medieval Catholicism, they were there, but they obviously were not as heated because they were in-house debates. I mean, not that in-house debates can't get heated, but I would say generally, somebody who sees you as a heretic and you see them as a heretic, you're generally not going to have a very good conversation. Whereas if you're both coming from the same general point of view, you can get a lot more done. And I think that on a lot of things in these issues, Catholicism definitely offers a large variety in opinion. You cannot be a strict, an extreme synergist, believing that man has will and can do action apart from God entirely, for reasons that I've already laid down, and you cannot believe that in strict Monergism, where only God acts, man has no cooperation whatsoever, for reasons I have already laid down. Pretty much anywhere in between is a live option in Catholicism. Any combination of those things. And I think it's a very complex issue. I don't think you can choose one side or another, because we're talking about relationship here, people. We're talking about the relationship between God and man and God. And this is a fluid, moving thing. It's a live thing. You can't just put it in a box and say, this is what's happening, this is what always happens, this is what always will happen. Okay? To think otherwise, I would say, is both naive about God and slightly arrogant. So these debates have raged even among Protestants. You have the Calvinists, you have the Arminians. Those debates that go on. Then you also have the Lutherans thrown in there, who have a slightly different view than the Calvinists and the Arminians. But again, going back to the issue of Sola Fide, the question here is, what does Sola Fide actually mean? Because, like I said, various Protestant groups have taken it to mean different things, and some of these things are more Catholic than others. Some Protestants will say that Sola Fide will take what I would consider an extreme view, where Sola Fide means that literally all that you need is faith to go to heaven. What they actually define faith as is another question and all as well. But I would say in the extreme view, you have the once saved, always saved sort of view. The once saved, always saved view. Where as long as you make one profession of faith at one point in your life, that's all that you need to be saved. And you will be saved. And there's absolutely nothing you could ever do to forfeit that salvation. Some will say, you can forfeit that salvation, if your works do not bear out your faith, then you have forfeited your salvation. But I kind of go back and I'm like, how is that different than the Catholic view? I mean, I guess you don't have the aspects laid out about merit and penance and things like that, but they have the basis of all those things there. It's like they have all the snow, but not the avalanche to take a view. It's all the view there. It's there in potentiality that they could believe in merit and penance, but they choose not to, basically, because it's. But if you take those views to their logical conclusions, it's very easy to get to a view of merit and and penance, and some Catholics even don't even like those terms. Now they wouldn't deny the reality, but those terms, and often Protestants will get the terms wrong in the first place on what Catholics actually mean by merit. From a Catholic point of view, merit is just that which a person does to grow closer to God, to grow more deeply in love with God. That's kind of the relational. That's the easiest way I know how to explain it, and it's probably the most true way to explain it. It's not systematic; it's relational, and that's what the Christian life is all about. It's a relationship with God, between man and man, between God and man, between man. Okay, merit is man's falling more deeply in love with and God and then it's God in return. Basically, as man falls more deeply in love with God, his heart becomes larger. His heart opens, you could say, and he has more of a capacity for God. That is what Catholics mean by merit. I don't see how you can argue with that from a Protestant point of view. I really don't. I mean, there's plenty of Protestants that agree with that. I mean, the Methodists and many Anglicans, that's exactly their view. What it comes down to is, can you fall more and deeply in love with God and receive more of the love of God as you do it? Yeah, that's what prayer and relationship with God is all about. We don't know relationship in any other way. Relationships are gradients of love. You either have very little love, what we would consider hate, or you have a maximal amount of love for someone, and that is, in erotic terms, it's infatuation, but in like agapic terms, it's like head over heels in love with someone. And I struggle to see where the main differences are with Sola Fide. And I think sometimes Protestants will plant stakes in the ground that maybe they don't see the consequences of.